When Jasper Joseph's childhood friend once again sat in the passenger seat next to him, I didn't cause trouble or get angry, just obediently went to the back of the car and sat next to his close brother, Egan Alexander. As the car rattled, my knee accidentally touched the thigh of the man next to me. It was a firm, taut, muscular leg. I deliberately did not withdraw my leg, and he did not pull away either. Later, when we stopped at a rest stop, the sweetheart clingily dragged Jasper Joseph off to the restroom. The moment the car door closed, Egan Alexander grabbed the back of my neck and kissed me. Stunned by the unexpected kiss, I was filled with both doubt and curiosity to truly understand this man. The phrase, "to understand a man is the ultimate truth," suddenly popped into my head. When the childhood sweetheart Mary Joyce once again occupied the front passenger seat next to Jasper Joseph, I didn't fight for it. I quietly turned, opened the rear door, and paused slightly when I saw Egan Alexander. I hadn't expected someone as busy as him to join this short self-driving trip. I quickly regained my composure and gave him a slight nod in greeting. Egan Alexander wore glasses, and his face showed a faint weariness. He barely lifted his eyelids to glance at me, nodded, and then closed his eyes to rest. Mary Joyce, while buckling her seatbelt, turned back and raised her eyebrows. "Smugly at me, Jennifer. I get carsick, so I have to sit in the front. Hope you understand." Jasper Joseph also turned to look at me and said, "Mary gets carsick. Please be a little generous, and don't get upset over trivial matters." I smiled faintly and replied, "Of course." Jasper Joseph looked a bit surprised but said nothing more, as Mary Joyce quickly shoved half of a bitten sandwich into his mouth. "It's not very good. You help me eat it." Jasper Joseph ate the remaining half of the sandwich naturally, his expression unchanged. Mary Joyce glanced at me through the rearview mirror, stuck out her tongue, and giggled. I paid her no mind, picked up a bottle of soda to open. But the cap was too tight. I twisted and twisted but couldn't open it. Just then, Mary Joyce handed her water bottle to Jasper Joseph, asked him to open it. "Honey, I really can't open it. You know my hands have always been weak since we were little." Jasper Joseph said nothing, easily opened her bottle for her, and they passed the bottle back and forth, showing no hint of avoiding the intimacy. I felt nauseated and was about to put my bottle down when a man's hand reached over and took the bottle from mine. Beneath the black suit jacket sleeve was a layer of silver-gray shirt. His wrist was slender and delicate, his fingers were long and tapered, and his nails were neatly trimmed and clean. In the reflection of the car window, his fingers shone like jade. While I was still stunned, Egan Alexander opened the bottle and handed it back to me. The music in the car swelled just then. I quickly took the bottle and quietly whispered my thanks. Egan Alexander gave a slight nod and closed his eyes again. He must have just finished an overnight shift. His eyes were marked with tiny red blood vessels. I took small sips of water. The car was now cruising steadily on the highway. Mary Joyce's birthday was coming up, and Jasper Joseph specially organized this road trip to celebrate her. The group consisted of about 7 or 8 people, split into 3 cars. Our destination was a hot spring resort about 100 kilometers away. The car had not been driving long before Mary Joyce was practically glued to Jasper Joseph. The music was loud, so I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see them laughing and talking happily. Recently, Jasper Joseph and I had argued repeatedly over their overly intimate behavior. He had promised to be more mindful, but the next time he saw Mary Joyce, all of Jasper Joseph's promises seemed to have been tossed to the wind. I suddenly found the whole situation pointless. I lowered my head, mocked myself with a small smile, and turned to look out the window. The mountain road was winding. Sometimes small rocks would tumble down the cliff face. Every time the car bumped, my body couldn't help but sway, and my thin skirt offered no coverage for my bare knee. This time, my knee touched Egan Alexander's thigh again, right against him with no space in between. I instinctively wanted to pull my leg away, but just then, I noticed a faint, dark mark on Mary Joyce's neck. Even a fool would recognize it as a hickey. Who left it was obvious. In that instant, my heart turned to ice, and I resolutely kept my leg still. Egan Alexander opened his eyes. He looked at me, while I tried to look calm, stared straight ahead to avoid his gaze. But my knee, pressed tightly against his leg, seemed to have a mind of its own, pushing closer and closer. Through the thin fabric of his trousers, I could distinctly feel the taut, scorching muscles, as if they were burning my skin. The heat radiated from him in waves, spreading across my nerves, making my throat dry. I swallowed hard and hastily reached for my water bottle. The cold water partially quenched the internal chaos, making me feel more alert. But when I turned my head, I found that Egan Alexander was still not pulling away, allowing my leg to press against his. My heart seemed to stop for a moment before resuming a frantic beat, threatening to burst from my chest. Just then, the car suddenly swerved sharply, making my entire body lean to one side. From the front seat, Mary Joyce cried out, "Oh my God, you scared me to death, but your reaction was so fast. If you hadn't steered in time, that rock would have hit the car." Jasper, you're such a good driver. Mary Joyce suddenly leaned over and kissed his cheek. You're so good. Have a kiss. Jasper Joseph still remembered I was in the back seat. He frowned and glared at Mary Joyce, said, You're grown up. Be more proper. Jennifer is here. Mary Joyce widened her eyes innocently, turned back and said to me, Jennifer, Jasper and I grew up together since we were little. I've always seen him as my older brother. You're not mad, right? I pulled the thin blanket over my lap, looked up and smiled faintly. Said, Do you also kiss your biological brother like that at home? Mary Joyce immediately pouted and pretended to be wronged, honey. See? Jennifer really doesn't like me. Maybe I shouldn't go, so she won't be unhappy. Jasper Joseph frowned and said, That's enough, Jennifer. You're 2 years older than Mary. Can't you stop holding grudges over small things? She's just a child, used to being carefree. Don't say such unpleasant things. In that moment, I had no energy left to argue. He wanted me to be more tolerant? Of course. But I hoped he could be just as generous in the future. Beneath the blanket, my leg pressed even harder against Egan Alexander's. As the car briefly bumped, my knee and calf rubbed against him once more. Just then, his warm, slender hand suddenly rested on my thigh. The hand was pressed against my cool skin, radiating a burning heat that pulsed like waves. The sensation was magnified 1,000-fold. I could even distinctly feel the slight callous layer on the fingers he used for holding a scalpel. As his fingertip lightly brushed my skin, I clearly felt that gentle yet deliberate friction. Unable to stop myself, I turned my head to look at him, just a quick glance, but I caught his serious demeanor right away. His shirt collar was neatly buttoned, but his masculine Adam's apple was bobbing violently. The contours of his cheek were so refined they made one's heart flutter. Egan Alexander truly was an anomaly within Jasper Joseph's circle of friends. If it weren't for a complicated family connection between the two, Egan Alexander, with his aloof personality and extreme cleanliness, would surely never frequent this noisy crowd. When I started dating Jasper Joseph, I naturally became acquainted with him. But every time we met, it was only a perfunctory nod. He was a man of few words, disliked small talk, and his private life was almost a blank slate. During the few gatherings, while everyone else played cards, played ball, and laughed happily, he was often the first to leave. Sometimes he would stay, but only to sit alone in a corner of the sofa, eyes closed, resting, completely uninvolved in the fun. Jasper Joseph had often joked, My older cousin truly has purified his 6 senses. He's so clean that he doesn't have a speck of dust on him. Don't look at him. He's 27, but he might not have even touched a woman. He's better these past few years. He shows up 3 or 4 times out of 10 calls. A few years ago, he wouldn't show his face even once. In fact, I had heard of Egan Alexander in college. I had even seen him from a distance a few times, but in my eyes back then, Egan Alexander was like the first dream of many girls, a high, unreachable moon. He and I never had any special interaction. Only a few times when I felt chest discomfort and went to the hospital, I coincidentally got his number. At first, I was embarrassed, but Egan Alexander was so professional that I quickly calmed down. I secretly mocked myself, thinking that he was a surgical doctor who had seen countless cases. No matter how young, beautiful, or fit I was, in his eyes, I was merely a body that needed diagnosis. But even so, when he placed his hand on me during the examination, I still clenched my eyes shut, my face completely flushed. As I was leaving, I wasn't sure if I had misread the situation or if the examination room's heater was too hot, but I seemed to see his earlobes turning red. Mary Joyce's voice suddenly pulled me out of my thoughts. Honey, there's a rest stop ahead. Let's pull over for a bit. I need to use the restroom. I subtly bit my lower lip and tried to lift my leg to move away, but Egan Alexander's fingers tightened. My long eyelashes trembled, not daring to move. The car stopped. Mary Joyce immediately insisted on Jasper Joseph going to the restroom with her. Jasper Joseph hesitated for a moment, turned to look at me, but Egan Alexander suddenly spoke. She's asleep. Jasper Joseph seemed relieved. He nodded and said, Then watch over her for a minute. I'll take Mary to the restroom and be right back. Egan Alexander nodded faintly. The sound of the car door opening, then closing, echoed. Their voices and laughter gradually faded away. The entire space became so quiet that I could hear my own breathing clearly. Egan Alexander suddenly called my name softly. Jennifer Leon. Then he lifted the blanket covering my legs and continued. Your legs are covered in sweat. Aren't you hot? I lowered my head, completely avoided his gaze. I fumbled for the water bottle, wanted to drink to ease the awkwardness. But he took the bottle away. Egan Alexander said, Don't drink so much cold water. Have you forgotten what I told you before? I don't know where I found the courage, but I suddenly looked up at him and said, Dr. Egan, is your skill just mediocre? Egan Alexander slightly frowned and asked back, What did you say? I looked at him seriously, my lips slightly pursed, my chin slightly lifted as I spoke. I took all the medication and followed all your instructions, but it still hurts. Do I need another examination? Through the car window, not too far away, Mary Joyce was linking arms with Jasper Joseph. They were stuck to each other, barely any gap between them. He would occasionally pinch her cheek or pat her head. They looked exactly like a sweet, intimate couple. My chest felt compressed by a suffocating pressure, resentment, frustration, searching for an outlet but finding none. Without thinking, I suddenly grabbed Egan Alexander's hand and pressed my voice. Why don't you, Dr. Egan, fulfill your doctor's duty now and examine me? His hand was almost touching the area beneath my top, near my chest, but he was one step faster. His long, strong fingers unexpectedly gripped the back of my neck. With just a slight pressure, I was pulled close to him. He looked down at me, and I had to tilt my face up to meet his eyes. Egan Alexander spoke. Jennifer Leon, don't seduce me here. I did not flinch in my reply. Am I seducing you? Is Dr. Egan so lacking in medical ethics that he just stands by with crossed arms, knowing his patient is in distress? Before I could finish, Egan Alexander removed his glasses, leaned down, and kissed me. It was a kiss that belonged only to him, carried a touch of aloofness, the familiar scent of disinfectant, mixing with every inch of my skin, enveloping me until I felt breathless. My eyes widened. I instinctively wanted to push him away, but his hand gripped me tighter. A gasping breath escaped my lips, but in that moment, he took advantage of the opening and deepened the invasion. The oxygen in my lungs seemed to be completely drained. I started to feel dizzy, my knees went weak, and my entire body felt drained of strength. Egan Alexander held my chin. His kiss grew deeper and more intense with every moment. I felt my entire tongue base going numb. I don't know when my hands started clutching his shirt collar, wrinkling the previously smooth fabric. The sounds of heavy breathing and the clash of breaths were a chaotic mix. Tears of reflex welled up in the corners of my eyes. Just as I was about to be completely swept away, Egan Alexander suddenly stopped. I tilted my head back, my eyes still hazy and bewildered, unconsciously pleading for more. He gently curved his lips, wiped the moisture from the corner of my mouth with his thumb, and said, "Don't be in such a hurry." I was still dizzy, unable to fully recover. He lowered his head and lightly touched my lips again, gently, like a passing breeze. His forehead rested against mine. His deep, husky, and intensely sensual voice whispered in my ear, "Just 3 more kilometers. When we're almost there, I'll give it to you then." A buzzing sound exploded in my ears. My body, which was already soft and trembling from the kiss, suddenly felt like it was on fire, an unbearable heat. I could almost not believe that such words could come from Egan Alexander's mouth. My ears must have turned bright red, the back of my neck was hot and flushed. I hastily raised my hand to push him away, but Egan Alexander tilted his head, lightly kissed my earlobe, and whispered, "They're coming back!" I jumped, immediately turned to look out the car door. Jasper Joseph and Mary Joyce were walking toward the car, laughing and talking. I immediately pushed Egan Alexander away, settled back in my seat, pulled the blanket over me as if nothing had happened, and tried to pretend to be asleep. However, the moment I closed my eyes, the strange feeling on my lips made me pause. I secretly took out my compact mirror. My lips were slightly swollen and my red lipstick was smudged. It definitely looked suspicious. I immediately glared at Egan Alexander and said, "It's all your fault. My lips are swollen." He leaned back against the seat, leisurely cleaned his glasses. He looked up at me, then raised his chin toward somewhere, smiled faintly and asked, "Well, who should be blamed for that?" I followed his gaze reflexively and immediately widened my eyes, said in astonishment, "You? Why are you reacting like that? Jasper Joseph clearly said you were the type who practiced abstinence with no interest in women." Egan Alexander looked at me and said, "Jennifer Leon, I'm just a normal man." Egan Alexander put his glasses back on, used his finger to push the frame up his nose. His expression was calm, as if nothing had happened, completely unlike the man who had just kissed me until my legs were weak and I was disoriented. But it was that contrast that made my heart suddenly pound erratically. Who wouldn't want to personally pluck a high, aloof flower? Who wouldn't want to see a man known for his disciplined asceticism lose control for them? Understanding men, questioning men, becoming a man's focus. That is truly the truth. As Jasper Joseph and Mary Joyce were about to reach the car, Egan Alexander pulled out a packet of spicy, flavored snacks called Kiss Burn from somewhere, opened it and handed it to me, said, "Take this. Don't eat it. Just pretend you are." I pouted. "Why not eat it? It's my favorite snack." He replied softly, "Snacks are unhealthy. My profession requires me to advise you." He didn't even look up. I muttered a few words but still opened the snack bag, intending to take a bite. But before I could put it in my mouth, he took the bag away and tossed it into the car's trash bag. As the car door opened, Mary Joyce got in and immediately turned around to ask me, "Jennifer, what's wrong with your lips?" I calmly pointed to the trash bag. I ate a few pieces of kiss burn. It was so spicy that it swelled my lips. Mary Joyce covered her mouth and giggled, turned to Jasper Joseph. "Look! If I didn't know better, I'd think she just kissed someone until her lips swelled up." Jasper Joseph turned to look at me, his eyes showing suspicion, but when he saw Egan Alexander's cold, emotionless face beside me, he suddenly softened. He forced a smile and said, "Don't be silly. Jennifer has been in the car the whole time. Who would she kiss?" Mary Joyce pretended to be innocent. "Who knows? What if she did something while we were gone?" Before she could finish, Egan Alexander suddenly looked up. His eyes were icy as they stared at her. His deep voice carried authority. "She was asleep in the car the whole time, waking up just 5 minutes ago. I can vouch for that." Mary Joyce froze, stuttered, "You, Egan." But before she could complete her sentence, Egan Alexander coldly cut her off. "The Alexander family and the Joyce family are not close, and Mary and I are barely acquainted." Mary Joyce immediately turned crimson. Her expression was a mix of grievance and humiliation. She turned to Jasper Joseph for help. However, he saw the cold seriousness in Egan Alexander's demeanor and ultimately didn't dare utter a sound. Even though Mary Joyce was so upset that she was on the verge of tears, she didn't dare say anything. After all, the Joyce family still depended on the Joseph family, and even the Joseph family was merely hanging on in the eyes of the Alexander family. She could only swallow her anger, but her eyes were still full of resentment. Through the rearview mirror, Mary Joyce secretly shot me a furious look. I knew well that she had just added another debt to my ledger. Mary Joyce remained unusually silent for the remaining 30 kilometers. When we arrived at the hot spring resort, she clung to Jasper Joseph, whined, and demanded to share a room with him. "Honey, I've never slept alone since I was little. I'm so scared. It's a suite with 2 separate bedrooms anyway, so Jennifer won't mind, right?" She shook Jasper Joseph's arm as she spoke. He looked at me with an awkward expression, while I simply smiled gently and said, "In that case, let me switch rooms with her. I prefer the room with the garden anyway." Jasper Joseph looked relieved and apologetic. He leaned in and coaxed me. "Jennifer, it's Mary's birthday this time. Please make a small concession. I'll take you on a private trip next time to make it up to you, okay?" I generously nodded and replied, "Sounds good." Before I could fully agree, he quickly grabbed my luggage to help me move to the other room. As he left, his face looked much more relaxed, as if a great burden had been lifted. In the evening, there was a small gathering. I returned to my room to shower, changed into a new dress, and took my time. Applying makeup, deliberately choosing a seductive burgundy lipstick. When I arrived, everyone was already there. The room was lively, and my eyes immediately found Egan Alexander sitting alone by the window. He was wearing a white dress shirt and his glasses, which accentuated his cold, restrained look. When he saw me enter, he only spared a quick glance before lowering his eyes again. But just as I turned away, I suddenly saw him lift his hand to undo the top button of his shirt, then lightly trace his Adam's apple with his long, slender fingers. I lowered my gaze, subtly bit my lower lip. My mind raced with foolish thoughts. What if I bit him there? How much control would he lose? Mary Joyce ran over, grabbed my hand and shook it, then pouted in annoyance. "Jennifer, you look stunning today. But sister, it's my birthday. You're stealing all my attention." "Honey, she's bullying me again." I looked at Mary Joyce. She had clearly prepared carefully for tonight, and, truthfully, looked like a little princess. But there is a saying that cute sometimes isn't worth a dime next to sexy. Normally, I dress simply and comfortably, but today I felt spontaneous, opting for sensual makeup, and wearing a short spaghetti-strap burgundy dress paired with matching lace-up heels. The dress color highlighted my pale skin, and the straps wrapped around. My ankles made my long legs look soft, seductive, and mesmerizing. When Jasper Joseph looked at me, a spark of amazement was clearly visible in his eyes. The others also teased loudly, "Wow, Jennifer is gorgeous today. Young Master Jasper is truly blessed. Look at his eyes, they're practically glued to her." Jasper Joseph looked smug. He walked closer to me but tried to act serious. "Jennifer, today is Mary's birthday. You can wear whatever you want, but it would be better to save that for a date with me. This is making Mary unhappy." I quietly looked at the man in front of me, the man I once had some affection and attachment for. But in that moment, I realized those feelings were quickly receding, leaving behind emptiness, with nothing left to hold on to. Strangely, I felt neither heartbroken nor regretful. Jasper Joseph frowned slightly, his eyes still fixed on me. He continued, "Jennifer, are you listening to me? What more do you want? Go change." He lightly grabbed my arm, pulled me aside to a quiet corner, and lowered his voice. "Jennifer, you're 2 years older than Mary. Just yield to her a bit." I pushed his hand away and smiled faintly. "What if I say I don't want to?" Jasper Joseph froze for a moment, then let out a small, mocking laugh distinctively. Visible in his eyes, "What right do you have to say, 'I don't want to' me?" I answered him directly, "But I just don't want to." His face darkened, a mixture of sarcasm and anger. "You don't want to? Then let's break up." His handsome face was cold, confident that I wouldn't dare be so decisive. He thought I would cry and cling to him, unable to let go. I looked at him calmly and pulled my hand free. "Then let's break up. As you wish." Jasper Joseph sneered. His cold smile could make one shudder. "Ha, I give. You a little respect? And you think you're something special, huh? Get lost right now." I did not reply. I just turned, opened the door, and walked straight out. I didn't return to my room. Instead, I grabbed a bottle of wine and walked to the small garden outside. The mountain night wind blew gently, cool and refreshing. By the second glass, I pulled out my phone and texted Egan Alexander. "Dr. Egan?" He replied very quickly, as if he had been waiting for my message all along. "What's wrong? Do your mammary glands still hurt?" Before I could text anything more, he called a few minutes later. I leaned back against a chair, felt slightly dizzy. My senses of smell and sight became hazy. But his voice over the phone was incredibly clear, deep, and steady. "Jennifer Leon, where are you?" I pouted. "When you kissed me, you called me Jennifer. Now that the kiss is over, I'm Jennifer Leon again. You really are a cold-hearted Dr. Egan." The other end was silent for a few seconds. He seemed to chuckle softly. But when he called my name again, his voice was completely different, gentle, soft, and carrying something irresistible. "Jennifer, where are you?" I replied, "In the garden, Dr. Egan. Do you want to come here, or should I go to you?" Egan Alexander led me to his room. He wasn't in the same building as us, but lived in an isolated house amidst the bamboo forest behind the mountain. On the way, I curiously asked, "Aren't you afraid of being seen?" He held my hand, gently pulled me to avoid slippery stones on the path, and said, "Watch your step. This area belongs to the Alexander family. You don't have to worry about anything." I smiled and replied, "Who said I was worried?" He tilted his head and glanced at me. I looked straight into his eyes and continued, "Jasper Joseph and I broke up. So, what do I have to be afraid of?" Egan Alexander raised an eyebrow. "When?" I sneered, "About half an hour ago. You were there, weren't you?" He didn't say anything. The bright moonlight shone through the layers of bamboo leaves, creating shimmering, flickering streaks of light on his face. He stood in the bamboo forest like a straight, solitary, and elegant bamboo stalk. He squeezed my hand, pulled me into his arms, and said, "Jennifer, you'd better be truly finished with him. Don't go back and make me eat the regrown grass." Egan Alexander's house was a small villa with a large garden. As soon as we stepped through the gate, he pushed me against the inside of the door. He lifted my face and kissed me deeply, urgently, and powerfully. During a break for breath, his face rested against my neck, his hot breath against my skin, making my whole body tremble. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my fingers were intertwining with Egan Alexander's slightly tousled, thick hair. I whispered his name, my voice caught in my breath. "Dr. Egan, have you ever touched another woman?" He tilted his head, lightly kissed my lips. His answer was deep and breathless. "No," I continued, almost provoked him. "So, you've never been to bed with anyone?" Egan Alexander lifted my face, gently wiped away the moisture at the corner of my mouth with his thumb. He was quite a bit taller than me, but because I was wearing high heels, I could easily lean into his chin. My hand, which had been threading through his hair, slowly moved down the back of his neck, then traced the wide-open collar of his shirt. When my fingertips touched his Adam's apple, his reaction was almost instinctive. His Adam's apple bobbed hard, and the palm holding my face burned intensely. My heart was a mess. The suppressed emotions wanted to explode, as if finding a door to release them. I closed my eyes and kissed his Adam's apple. His hand suddenly threaded deeper into my hair, pulled me closer. Our lips were glued together. His breathing was erratic, but he struggled to maintain control, letting no sound escape. I whispered softly, "Dr. Egan, did you forget the main order of business?" His long finger stroked my cheekbone. He lowered his head and kissed the corner of my eye. "What business?" I said, I hurt. Shouldn't you examine me?" With that, I took his left hand and guided it to my chest, placed it over my heart. The moonlight outside the window shone into the room, illuminating my skin, which was as white as ice and frost. I looked up and saw a faint murky layer in his eyes, desire, a craving suppressed to the extreme. I held his hand, squeezed it tighter, whispering, "Can you start now?" Egan Alexander's hand was scalding hot. The skin on my chest felt scorched by his heat. His pharynx slid forcefully again, and the look in his eyes was no longer cold but a fiercely possessive gaze that wanted to devour me whole. The distance between us was so close that I could distinctly feel every reaction. On his body, hot, strong, and clear, like a volcano about to erupt. My body started trembling. My rationality was completely consumed. But I had underestimated Egan Alexander's self-control. Right at that climax, he still managed to force himself to let go and move away from me. I stared at him, stunned, full of dissatisfaction, and felt wronged. He held me tightly, lowered his head and lightly kissed my lips, said, "Not here. Let's take a shower first. It's not good for you if it's not clean." My heart pounded. The mountain wind blew cool in the late night, but in his arms I only felt an unusual softness and warmth. As we stepped into the house before I could bend down to change my shoes, Egan Alexander knelt down first, already held a pair of new slippers. He was a surgeon, his hands were naturally skillful and flexible, yet he fumbled twice while undoing the straps of my high heels. The burgundy straps were wrapped around my ankle, requiring only a light pull to come undone, yet he carefully untied each knot. I looked down, clearly saw his broad shoulders under the white shirt, his back perfectly straight, his shirt neatly tucked into his trousers. That sight made my throat feel dry, a mix of frustration and longing. As he stood up, I suddenly went on tiptoes, wrapped my arms around his neck, and proactively kissed him on the lips. From the doorway all the way to the bathroom, the kiss was ceaseless. When the water in the shower began to flow, his shirt was already wrinkled from my pulling, and the straps of my dress had slipped off my shoulders some time earlier. Egan Alexander pinned me against the wall. His kiss was so powerful and deep that my entire body seemed to melt. The thick steam clouded the bathroom. He seemed to want to swallow me whole along with the mist. In the final moment, Egan Alexander suddenly gripped my wrist, forcefully pulled me away from his chest. He brushed the wet, tangled strands of hair from my temple, intertwined his fingers. With mine, his voice deep and husky amid heavy breaths, to the room. "We can't stay here. It will make you uncomfortable." Egan Alexander looked quite slender when fully dressed, but I never expected the body beneath that shirt to be so flawless. His six-pack abs were distinctly hard and firm. I couldn't believe he maintained such a physique despite his high-stress job. But I was the one who benefited in the end. I was mesmerized, traced every line of his body, reluctant to let go. In our tangled state, he didn't forget to ask me, "Do you like it?" I traced him a few more times and replied, "Of course. Who doesn't like a man with abs?" He smiled softly and said, "From now on, all of this is yours." My consciousness at that moment was almost floating, drifting between reality and dream. In school, Egan Alexander was the perfect senior in the eyes of many girls, someone I dared not dream of. I hid all my maidenly thoughts in my heart. Yet now, that high moon lay perfectly in the palm of my hand. I couldn't even believe how I managed to get all this. Not to mention Jasper Joseph. There was a tangled mess of old debts between him and me. I almost had to call Egan Alexander cousin-in-law. But I couldn't think too much. Egan Alexander's kiss covered my lips once more. His fingers were tightly intertwined with mine. His body pressed down. My entire body was pressed against the mattress. I didn't dare look at my face then. It must have been completely flushed and bewildered. In the spacious bedroom, only a small floor lamp shone softly in the corner. The curtains were partially drawn, and the moonlight crept in like silver silk, painting intertwining bamboo shadows on the floor. I lay in the moonlight, almost blending with the white. Outside the window, the flowers had closed their petals. In the quiet night, they glowed a deep crimson against the black and white backdrop. Inside the room, everything remained taut and intense. If you looked closely, you could still see the confused handprints and chaotic red hickeys on my waist. I remembered Egan Alexander using both hands to tightly embrace my waist, his fingers digging deep into my flesh. The strength was astonishing. Just thinking about it made my face warm up and my heart beat wildly. This was the first time for both of us. It was a little rushed, not as perfect as I imagined. But after we finished, he leaned down, gently kissed my temple, and asked, "Do you want some water?" I just made a soft M&M sound, lay face down on the pillow, too exhausted to give any other answer. He brought water. I was still too lazy to move, and said, "Feed me." And he truly held me in his arms, carefully supported my head, fed me water one sip at a time. As soon as I finished drinking, before I could react, he put the cup down, turned, and pressed down on me again. I finally realized that the man once called pure and ascetic no longer had any such image. There was no trace of the so-called untouched by the world's dust. The second time lasted a long time. I distinctly felt that Egan Alexander, the man full of rationality and principles, had a terrifying learning speed. He easily grasped every sensitive spot on my body, teased me to the point of frenzy. Tears rolled down the corner of my eyes, soaking into my hair, and he still coaxed me, forced me to call him honey in broken gasps. In the end, I completely lost track of which night it was. When I woke up the next morning, it was already bright, and Egan Alexander was nowhere to be found. I felt restless and uncomfortable, wanted to sit up and get some water. But as soon as I moved, my whole body felt like it had been run over by a truck, sore and exhausted. It took me a while to slowly get out of bed. On the nightstand, under the cup, was a note. Egan Alexander's neat, familiar handwriting read, "I'm sorry, Jennifer. There was a serious accident and the hospital is short-staffed. I had to rush back. I will contact you when I'm done. Be good." I stared at the note, my mind blank for a few seconds. The first thought that popped up was, could this be a familiar excuse used by men? Did Egan Alexander just see last night as a fleeting encounter, a passing cloud? Yet, I couldn't help but check my phone. The top breaking news was the chain of accidents near Egan Alexander's hospital. Many people were injured and were rushed there overnight. He hadn't lied to me, but he said, "I will contact you." What about me? What should I do? My mind was a mess. I didn't even know where to go or what to do next. I only knew I didn't want to stay here anymore. I washed my face, changed my clothes, and prepared to go back to my room to pack and leave. But as soon as I walked out of the villa and reached the lakeside, I ran into Jasper Joseph and Mary Joyce's group. I didn't want to face them and immediately turned around to take a different path. But Mary Joyce called out, "Jennifer, why are you wearing a man's shirt?" When I left the room, since the hickeys on my body were very obvious, I casually grabbed a man's shirt from the closet to wear over my clothes. It must have been Egan Alexander's, left for one of his visits. Mary Joyce's question made me instinctively clutch the lapel of the shirt. Jasper Joseph's face immediately darkened. "Jennifer, whose shirt are you wearing?" I tried to keep my composure. The first thought in my mind was to protect Egan Alexander. I initiated last night. I couldn't let him get dragged into this mess. I replied softly, "It was cold last night. I just borrowed a server's shirt casually." Jasper Joseph took a step closer, his eyes sharp as knives. "That's the same dress from last night. Don't tell me you didn't return to your room all night." He raised his hand, intended to pull open my collar. I slapped his hand away and took a step back. "If I remember correctly, we broke up last night. What I do, what I wear, no longer concerns you, right?" Mary Joyce immediately widened her eyes, shouted as if struck by lightning, "Jennifer, did you break up with my brother?" I looked at her calmly. "Yes, we broke up." "You must be happy, Mary." Mary Joyce instantly flared up. "What do you mean by that? How does our breakup concern me? You make it sound like I'm a homewrecker. Honey, aren't you going to manage her? What if people start rumors that I stole you and I get called a mistress?" Jasper Joseph patted her hand to calm her, pulled her behind his back. Then he looked at me. His eyes were full of anger. "You're making a scene and demanding a breakup over such a trivial matter? How many times do I have to tell you? Mary Joyce and I are just like siblings. There's nothing going on." Mary Joyce stood beside him, also gave a cold, sarcastic laugh. "Jennifer, don't think everyone is as despicable as you. There can still be an innocent friendship between a man and a woman. Aren't you ridiculous for making a fuss over such unreasonable things?" I took a light breath, completely out of patience. "I'm not making a fuss. I just don't want to continue anymore. Besides, I made it very clear last night. We have already broken up." I didn't want to say anything more to Jasper Joseph. My body was still aching. Every mark on me was a constant reminder of what happened last night. Fortunately, Egan Alexander knew how to restrain himself, or I doubt I would have the strength to stand here arguing. Jasper Joseph gritted his teeth, his face growing darker. "Fine. Then tell me clearly, where did you go last night?" I looked directly at Jasper Joseph without flinching and said, "Why are you asking where I went? I'm single. Where I slept last night, what I did, and who I was with are none of your business." Jasper Joseph was slightly stunned. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to answer so frankly. He took another step forward, his voice clearly angry. "You really dared to do something like that? Jennifer, you've crossed the line." I stepped back, my eyes no longer soft but full of resolve. I sneered, "The line? When you were hugging Mary Joyce, did you think about the line? When you let her sit in the passenger seat instead of me, did you think about my feelings?" The air around us grew cold. Mary Joyce stood behind Jasper Joseph. Her face was pale, but she still maintained her pretense of innocence. Her voice was shrill with false grievance. "Don't put all the blame on me. Jasper and I really have nothing going on." I laughed faintly, not bothering to look at her. "Nothing going on, yet you're stuck together all day? Nothing going on, yet you feed each other sandwiches and water while chatting? If there was truly nothing, I wouldn't have to walk away like this." Jasper Joseph now lost all composure. He clenched his hands into fists and said, "If you're so bold, tell me clearly. Where were you last night? Tell me." I chuckled softly, raising my eyebrow dismissively. "I met a friend, had some drinks, chatted a bit. Just drinking and chatting." "What? Does that concern you?" I lightly tossed my hair. Jasper Joseph's face suddenly darkened. He pointed directly at my neck. His voice suddenly rose sharply. "Then what is this? What is that on your neck?" I glanced at him, reached up to touch the spot he pointed at, and said calmly, "Probably a mosquito bite." His voice was furious. "Jennifer, Leon, who do you think you're fooling?" I smirked. "What do you think it is? And even if it is what you think, so what? A man and a woman can have an innocent friendship. A few kisses are just a sign of being close friends." Having said that, I turned to look directly at Mary Joyce, intentionally asked, "Miss Mary, am I right?" Mary Joyce's face was flushed red, but she couldn't say a word. She just pulled on Jasper Joseph's arm, her eyes watering as if about to cry. Jasper Joseph ignored her, his eyes still locked onto the hickey on my neck. He almost ground out the words, "Jennifer Leon, which scoundrel were you drinking with last night? You better tell me clearly." I laughed. My calm demeanor infuriated him. "If you're so capable, go investigate yourself." Then I shrugged, tilted my body to the side, and added, "Move aside. I want to go rest." It was this calm indifference that truly hurt the self-satisfied young Master Jasper's ego. His face was grim. He ground out every word. "Jennifer Leon, you'd better not let me find out who you're flirting with. If I do, you'll regret it." I gave a faint smile, looked back at him one last time. Yes, whoever regrets it is a scoundrel. I returned to my room, took another shower, changed into comfortable, loose clothes, and packed my luggage. Without another word, I left the resort. On the way home, my second brother called me several times, but I didn't answer. Very quickly, he sent a voice message. "You fought with Jasper Joseph again, didn't you? Apologize immediately. Stop making a fuss. I'm negotiating a collaboration with the Joseph family. Don't ruin my big deal." I felt a surge of choking anger in my chest, heavy and impossible to swallow. I replied, "I was only dating, not selling myself. We've broken up, and there's no chance of going back." My brother shouted furiously, "Jennifer Leon, you think you're flying high, huh? Let me tell you, if you can't keep a man like Jasper Joseph, don't blame me for letting mom and dad kick you out of the house." Since graduating from college, I had been completely independent. My parents had also made it clear that everything belonging to the Leon family was for my two older brothers. The family owned a lot of real estate, but ultimately they only left me one small 60-square-meter apartment. Everything else was in their names, so how did the Leon family's business or the future of the Leon family concern me? I simply smiled and replied with just 4 words, "Wouldn't want anything more." I returned home and locked myself in my apartment for 3 days straight. No one can truly be calm when facing a family like that. One can't be sad, nor can one be happy. I felt depressed. At night, I often tossed and turned, unable to sleep, my head pounding as if it would explode. Having no other choice, I laboriously got up to drink some wine. Perhaps it was the wine, or perhaps my mood was too low, but the cyst in my mammary gland began to ache faintly. Medication didn't help. The pain became increasingly noticeable. I had to force myself to go to the hospital. This time, I deliberately avoided registering under Egan Alexander's name, chose a different doctor. After all, my entire life was a mess right now. I truly didn't know how to face him. After waiting in the hallway for a while, a nurse walked over and called my name. I stood up and followed her, only to be led directly to Egan Alexander's office. In that moment, I instinctively turned to retreat, but his voice rang out from behind. "Jennifer, don't go." He looked like he hadn't slept for 2 or 3 days straight. There were dark circles and bloodshot veins under his eyes. His entire face was utterly exhausted. He said, "Sit down for a moment and wait for me." Then he took off his white coat, seriously went to wash and sterilize his hands. I sat there, my gaze fixed on his long, strong fingers being rinsed by the water. Then I became lost in thought again. My mind was filled with the image of that night. This hand had traced so many places on my body, invaded bit by bit, pushed me to the peak of pleasure repeatedly. I was truly corrupted. My mind was full of indecent thoughts. When Egan Alexander finished drying his hands, he walked toward me and said, "Is it hurting again? I'm sorry, Jennifer. I've been so busy lately that I couldn't call you sooner." I looked at him. In just 3 days, he had visibly lost weight. A layer of dark stubble had grown on his chin. He hadn't had time to shave. I couldn't resist. I lightly reached up to touch it and said, "Your beard has grown out. It looks bad." He took my hand, lightly rubbed his chin against my palm, and replied with a faint smile, "I'll go shave right away." I held his hand tightly, prevented him from standing up. "I'm kidding. It looks good like this, too. It has a mature, masculine look. People call it pheromones in books," he asked, his voice laced with teasing. "So, I should keep it?" I wrinkled my nose, half joking, half serious. "No, you should still shave. Otherwise it will hurt when we kiss." He chuckled, the corners of his lips clearly curved. "Then let's test it out to see if it hurts?" I glanced at him sternly. "You're in your office," Egan Alexander replied. "It's all right. I have a half day off today. No one will interrupt us. I was planning to call you anyway, but then I saw you came to the hospital. Jennifer, I'm sorry. I didn't know that was your first time." We sat close to each other, separated only by a window pane. Outside was a garden. The faint scent from the camphor trees mixed with the wind blew into the room. The light poured in, casting shadows on his angular face. I could even see every eyelash, the faint dark circles under his eyes, and the quiet signs of fatigue at the corners of his eyes. Egan Alexander was once the distant dream I secretly admired throughout my youth. Now, sitting across from him, I suddenly felt a stinging in my nose. Some words are not easy to speak because, when facing someone you have looked up to for too long, it's easy to feel vulnerable and insecure. Yet my heart was filled with selfishness. I didn't want to share him with anyone, nor did I want the dirty people from my family to cling to him. I know I am selfish and materialistic. I never wanted to be exploited. I never wanted to sacrifice myself for people who only wanted to drain my life. And just like now, I wanted the whole world to know that Egan Alexander was mine. But I couldn't make it public. This man was too pure, too outstanding. I didn't want him to get caught in the mud surrounding me. My heart was conflicted. I forced a smile and asked lightly, "Are you planning to take responsibility for me?" Egan Alexander didn't smile. He only looked at me, answered very seriously, "I want to—" I paused for a moment, then let out a small, light laugh. "Don't be so serious, Dr. Egan. You're scaring me. Anyway, we are both adults. I can take responsibility for my own actions. I don't need a doctor like you, Dr. Egan. But I'm in a lot of pain. Can I go get treatment first?" Egan Alexander looked at me. He was silent for a few seconds, then immediately switched back to professional mode. He carefully examined me, then adjusted some medication and instructed, "Go for physical therapy first. Hot compresses and massage will make you feel much better." I nodded, stood up, and prepared to leave. But Egan Alexander took out a clean white coat and said, "I'll take you there." During the hot compress and massage, I was still a little shy, so I quietly closed my eyes and asked, "Can't you let a nurse do it?" Egan Alexander put on his gloves and raised an eyebrow. "Are you questioning my professionalism?" I was speechless and remained silent. The moment his fingers touched me, my face instantly flushed. I couldn't deny it. Egan Alexander's technique was truly excellent. After just a moment, I felt so comfortable that I became drowsy. Near the end of the treatment, he seemed to whisper my name, but I was too sleepy to open my eyes. He said something to me, or perhaps nothing at all, just quietly turned and left. I slept until morning. When I woke up, I didn't look for Egan Alexander. I just asked the nurse to relay a message and silently left the hospital. I wore a mask, bowed my head, and headed towards the hospital's main entrance. But as soon as I stepped downstairs, someone grabbed my wrist tightly, followed by a slap that felt like a bolt of lightning, leaving me stunned. When I recovered, I saw my two older brothers standing in front of me. Their faces were cold and angry. My second brother shouted, "Jennifer Leon, you're coming with us to see Jasper now." I struggled and said, "I'm not going." My eldest brother immediately yelled, "It's not up to you. Jasper said that as long as you yield, he will consider getting engaged to you. You know clearly that if the Leon family's business is to prosper, Jasper is the fastest route." I struggled with all my might, gritted my teeth, and said, "I will not go." My second brother, temperamental, raised his hand to hit me again. But my eldest brother stopped him in time. He looked at me with a gentle gaze, his voice softer. "Jennifer, our family is truly facing difficulties. If this collaboration is canceled, the Leon family is finished. You are a part of this family. We have never treated you badly. Just help us this one time, okay?" I sneered. "Did you ever think about how people will see me later? How they will scorn, despise, and trample on me?" My eldest brother said again, "You are young, beautiful, and well-educated. Jasper truly likes you and won't treat you badly. Jennifer, don't be naive. Do you know how many people are scrambling to marry into the Joseph family?" I took 2 steps back, looked coldly at my 2 brothers, and said, "I already told you, I will not get back with Jasper Joseph. If you miss that lucrative marriage so much, then go sell your own daughters." My second brother yelled, "Jennifer Leon, if you no longer have any sibling affection, then return everything Mom and Dad gave you. Cut off all ties with the Leon family from now on." I cut across his words. "Fine, I will return it." Perhaps seeing my resolve, my eldest brother frowned and said, "Jennifer, you're young. Simple thinking leads to mistakes. Wait until you start your own family, and you'll understand the importance of your maternal family. Don't regret it when it's too late." I couldn't help but laugh. In my adolescence, I was deeply unhappy, conflicted, confused, and even considered suicide. I didn't understand why my parents loved my 2 brothers so much but were always cold and distant toward me. There were times when I fell into a deep spiral of self-doubt. But later, I accidentally discovered that I was just an abandoned child adopted by the Leon family, and their adoption of me was merely a tool to seek profit, a pawn for commercial marriages. How much sincerity does one need for a tool? After understanding everything, I gradually learned to save myself, escaped the dark dead end in my heart. I returned the apartment and the car to the Leon family. I also gave all the 200,000 yuan I saved from working for 2 years to my parents. I will try to repay the debt of raising me, but my marriage is something I want to control myself. When I left the Leon family's house, everyone's face was grim. The document severing all ties, complete with everyone's name and fingerprint, was not handed to me, it was thrown directly at my face. I moved into a new rental room, trying to regain my spirits. During that time, Egan Alexander contacted me quite a few times. I only replied with a few brief sentences when he asked about my medical condition. He once asked me out, but I thought about it for a long time and still couldn't agree. I was afraid that seeing him would make me unable to control myself, wanting to hug him, kiss him, sleep with him, wanting to keep him for myself. But I was also heartbreakingly rational. I was afraid that the beautiful dream was just a bubble that would eventually burst and leave nothing behind. Egan Alexander didn't pressure me or cling to me. Occasionally, I would secretly check his personal page. He only posted a few pictures of himself running. I felt like a pervert, always zooming in on the photos, greedily looking at every detail of his body. My job gradually became difficult. I vaguely guessed that Jasper Joseph was secretly causing trouble. But I couldn't quit now. I could only grit my teeth and endure, even though the meager salary and oppressive pressure almost made me collapse. One night, coming home late from a shift, I was surprised to see Egan Alexander standing beneath my apartment building. It was already autumn. He wore a dark gray long coat, standing straight and still at the entrance like a statue. His long, slender fingers held a cigarette. It was probably the first time I had seen him smoke. The moment he saw me, he immediately put out the cigarette. I froze on the spot. The cold sandwich in my hand dropped to the ground with a thud. Egan Alexander strode toward me. Without a word, and without giving me a chance to refuse, he embraced me and lowered his head to kiss me. The kiss was deep and intense. The bitter taste of nicotine permeated my very being but was intoxicating. In just a moment, I stood on my tiptoes, tightly wrapped my arms around his neck, and passionately responded. I truly missed him so much that I only wanted to kiss him, hug him, and cling to him until death. We kissed all the way up the stairs. As I fumbled with the key to unlock the door, he hugged me tightly from behind, lowering his head to kiss my earlobe. That kiss made my whole body go weak. I couldn't even put the key into the lock. The door opened. He carried me inside, then pushed me against the shoe cabinet. I pulled open his jacket and shirt, touching the firm muscles of his abdomen underneath. It was like an electric current shot through my body from my fingertips, making me involuntarily let out a soft moan. But immediately his lips invaded again, wrapped me in chaotic intoxication. I closed my eyes, no longer wanting to suppress myself. "Dr. Egan, would you like to examine me again?" I pulled his hand and slowly placed it on my chest. The emotions in him erupted violently. Unable to wait until we reached the bedroom, Egan Alexander and I became entangled repeatedly, until I was utterly exhausted and drifted off to sleep, curled in his arms, my head resting on his strong yet gentle arm. When I woke up, I was surprised to see Egan Alexander still in my rented room. I rubbed my eyes several times, unable to believe what I was seeing. He had his sleeves rolled up, carrying food out of the kitchen, and asked, "You're awake. Do you want something to eat?" I sat up, still confused, and asked, "Why didn't you leave?" Egan Alexander set the plate down and stood by the dining table. His gaze was as gentle as an autumn breeze. "I was afraid that if I left, you wouldn't pay attention to me for a long time again." He wore his glasses. His hair was uncombed, falling naturally onto his forehead. His entire being felt like a piece of warm, gentle jade. I always liked his look with glasses, but I liked taking them off myself even more. I walked up to him, tilted my head, looked into his eyes, and said, "I have nothing now. I might even lose my job. I'm not the Leon family's biological daughter. I'm just an adopted child. I'm very selfish, and I'm somewhat vain. I don't think you would like a person like me." I spoke honestly. The wounds and insecurity were impossible to hide. Perhaps he sensed my vulnerability, self-doubt, and helplessness. Egan Alexander opened his arms and embraced me tightly, said clearly, "Word Jennifer Leon, besides you, I have never cared about anything else." I looked at him, bewildered. "Why me? Why do you like me? I'm stubborn, conflicted, self-respecting, yet also insecure." Egan Alexander gently kissed me and said, "There's no why. I just like you." There was no why. He just liked me. Perhaps it had been a long time since they were students, or perhaps since she became Jasper Joseph's girlfriend, and they met again by chance. Egan Alexander himself couldn't say for sure. He only knew that since she had been with Jasper Joseph, he started forcing himself into the social circle he had always despised, just to see her a little more. Because of this, he had to suppress his jealousy and envy, appearing between them time and time again. Egan Alexander thought no one in the world knew how much he hated himself that day. In the car, when his knee accidentally touched hers, hated that tiny, meager joy. But he couldn't control himself, ultimately becoming the very kind of person he most despised. Yet, he never regretted that choice. The only thing he regretted was that he should have been more proactive, should have approached her sooner. He was even willing to be a despicable third party. In the end, I lost my job. The day I left the company, I ran into Jasper Joseph downstairs. Seeing me carry a box of belongings, he immediately got out of his car. This time, the passenger seat was empty. I didn't even glance at him and continued walking. But Jasper Joseph quickly blocked my path and said, "Jennifer, stop resisting me. I told you, you're so beautiful. Why do you need to suffer like this? Let's make up. I promise I won't see Mary Joyce anymore." I gave a faint smile, thinking that people truly are like this. They always yearn for what they can't have. His promise not to see Mary Joyce anymore was simply because they had crossed the line, done everything they needed to do, and now he was bored, which is why he remembered me. Seeing me smile, Jasper Joseph thought I was wavering and reached out to grab my hand. I pulled away, replied coldly, "Jasper Joseph, I already have a boyfriend." His face froze, looked utterly disbelieving. Impossible. "Since when did you have a boyfriend?" The corner of my mouth curled up mockingly. "Do you remember the time at the hot springs? I was wearing a man's shirt that day. That shirt belongs to him." That night, we drank wine, talked, and slept together. Jasper Joseph's face turned pale. His voice trembled. "Jennifer, don't be angry anymore." I tilted my head and smirked. "Didn't you and Mary Joyce do the same thing? And we hadn't even broken up then." He gritted his teeth. "It's not the same. I was just playing around. If I liked her, would there be room for you?" I replied calmly, "You're right. It's not the same." Because I was serious. I truly love him. Jasper Joseph was nearly driven insane. No one had ever dared to steal his woman like this. He shouted, "Tell me clearly, who the hell is that wild man? If I find him, I'll skin him alive." Just as he roared, a deep voice rang out from behind him. "Who do you want to skin alive?" Jasper Joseph froze like a puppet whose strings were cut. After a moment, he turned around and saw Egan Alexander standing behind him. He looked completely drained of strength, speechless. Egan Alexander wore a long black coat. His face was indifferent, and his eyes were aloof, covered by a layer of frost. He walked past Jasper Joseph, took the box from my hand, and said coldly, "I'll only say this once. Don't bother Jennifer again." Jasper Joseph was furious and unwilling to concede, but he didn't dare show it clearly in front of Egan Alexander. Eventually, he couldn't hold back and gritted out, "You know Jennifer is my girlfriend." Egan Alexander decisively interrupted, "If they broke up, she's not—" Jasper Joseph argued, "I only said we broke up because I was angry and lost my temper." Egan Alexander wrapped one arm around my waist, glanced coldly at Jasper Joseph. "I don't care. If Jennifer says they broke up, they broke up. If you're bothered by it, you don't have to call me cousin anymore. After all, the Alexander family and the Joseph family are not deeply related." Jasper Joseph immediately shut up. He had spent so much effort trying to cling to the Alexander family. If he lost this connection, his father would probably be the first person to skin him alive. I followed Egan Alexander into the car. After driving a considerable distance, I looked back and still saw Jasper Joseph standing dejectedly where he was. I turned to look at Egan Alexander. The sight of him concentrating on driving was mesmerizingly beautiful. Unable to resist, I pulled out my phone, took a side profile picture of him, and said, "Dr. Egan, I want to post a picture. I really want to show off that Egan Alexander is my man." He replied softly, Then post it." I opened the app, selected the picture I had just taken, and typed a caption, "The most handsome man in the world is mine now." The moment I posted it, my phone exploded with notifications. Looking at the comments, all filled with excited AAA, I felt the joy in my heart overflowing. The traffic light turned red. The car stopped. Egan Alexander took my hand and asked softly, "Are you that happy?" I nodded. "Very happy." He leaned over, kissed my cheek, and replied, "Jennifer Leon, I'm very happy too." The light turned green, and the car started moving again. The road ahead was long, but from this moment on, our love had only just begun.